Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all. I hope everybody is doing well. And bi'idhnillah ta'ala, today we will continue our series on how to take notes. And the last time I spoke about the importance of taking notes and writing in a book, and that many of the mashayikh do this and recommend this. So bi'idhnillah ta'ala, today this is what we're going to focus on, how to take notes in a book, some advice regarding that, some tips. Now, the very first thing you always have to ask yourself is, what kind of dars am I attending? What kind of lesson is it going to be? Is it going to be live with the sheikh or the teacher? Is it going to be online and live at the same time? Will there be a recording or not? And this is very important. Knowing if there is a recording or not will help you understand how detailed your notes should be. Now, obviously, if you know that there will be a recording that you can go back to, then your notes don't need to be so detailed because you will have time to go back to them to review with the recording. And this is something I remember very well in my first years in Medina when I attended the Dawrah of Sheikh Salih Al-Usaymi. And one of my friends told me, don't even worry, the recordings of these lessons will be uploaded on the website of the Sheikh. So at that moment I realized that I can put a lot of energy into focusing on the dars and less the notes, and then I can go back to the notes after the Dawrah is over. And this is exactly what I did. And I found this to be very, very beneficial because when I went over the recordings and at that point detailed my notes, it was like a revision in and of itself. It in fact helped me progress in the Arabic language at a spectacular rate. If somebody were to ask me, what is the one thing that made you skyrocket in terms of the Arabic language, I would have to say doing that is that one thing. Now, that being said, many lessons will not have the recordings or the audios available. So in those type of situations, you need to try your best to take as much notes as possible whilst still focusing on the dars. Obviously, that is not something easy to do, but one gets better at it with time and with practice. Now, the first advice I will give when it comes to writing notes on books is that they should be written clearly and with big letters. So the handwriting should not be small and unreadable. Now, this for various reasons. You may, for example, come back to this book later and not understand your own notes. And this has happened before. And you can even find stories of the ulama where this problem is mentioned.
وقد نهى العلماء فيما سبق عن الخط الصغير على الكتب. وندم فيما يذكر الإمام أحمد مرة على أنه كتب أحاديث بخط دقيق لما احتاج لها في كبره لم يحسن أن يكتب أن يستخرج تلك الفوائد لأنها كانت بخط صغير وتقارب الحبر مع بعضه حتى فاتت الفائدة.
يعني أبو حنيفة رحمه الله رضي عنه يعني رأى شخص يصغر الكتابة، قال لا تقرمط خطك فإنك إن كبرت تندم وإن مت تشتم.
هياخد عندك فائدة هذه نسخة.
Also, never forget that writing notes on your books is something that will be for the benefit of others as well, not just for yourself. Remember, we said last time that you should have your own library, you should have notes in your books so that your children, your family, and your descendants will be able to benefit from those notes. Now, if these notes are not clear, and if they're written in small letters, very hard to read, very hard to understand, then that is a little bit selfish, as these notes are not necessarily intended only for you. Remember, you should always tell yourself that these notes will be for others as well, and others, inshallah ta'ala, will benefit from these notes. So it is important to make that niyyah, that intention when writing your notes. We can also mention from the ways of taking notes, and this really depends on the person, what works best for them, but from the advices that we can give is that, for example, you can underline the word that your sheikh has explained or where he has given more detail, and on top of that word that is underlined, you write, for example, what the sheikh has said. Or on the side as well, if there is space, and this really depends on the type of book you are writing on and what type of space is available. But even when space is not available, this can be done, inshallah ta'ala. And if you are able, leave spaces as well, as you never know, you may come back to add more notes in the future. Maybe you will take the class a second time with another sheikh, for example, who will add more fawaid. So it's always recommended to leave some space, inshallah ta'ala, if that is possible. And by the way, even when the books do not have space, when there's a will, there's a way. You can always find some space, inshallah ta'ala, for notes. You just have to keep your notes brief and not go into too much detail. And here is an example of some of the notes I took whilst attending the lessons of Shaykh Al-Abbad in the Masjid Al-Nabawi, and it was the study of Sahih Al-Bukhari, and the versions of Sahih Al-Bukhari that are one volume generally do not have a lot of space, but I was still able to make it work. So if you find it hard to write notes on these type of books, then take inspiration from this example. Something else that is important to mention, and this personally in my opinion is something very important, is beware of Tadlees. Now what exactly is Tadlees? Tadlees, to make a long story short, is a term used in the science of hadith that denotes inaccuracy or being inaccurate in the way that you receive a certain knowledge. And it is used as a term on some of the muhaddithun, and they're called mudallisun, those who do tadlis, because they are not very clear on how they received the hadith from their shaykh. So for example, if a narrator says an, which means on the authority of, then that's not very clear. But if a narrator says haddathana, he told us, he declared to us, or akhbarana, such and such narrator, shaykh or teacher informed us, then that is very clear that he heard directly from that shaykh or that teacher. It's like me saying, for example, Shaykh Al-Qasim said, or Shaykh Al-Abbad said. Now that's not very clear. What does that mean? Did I hear it from him directly? Did I read it in his books? Was it an audio on YouTube? That's not very clear. But if I say, for example, Shaykh Al-Abbad told us, or I heard from Shaykh Al-Qasim such and such, then that is much clearer. Now the point I'm trying to get to is that it is important to clarify who you're taking knowledge from, when did you hear it, etc. So for example, what I advise is writing the date. So for example, if you're attending a lesson with your shaykh, you're writing your book, you write the date, for example. Okay, so on such and such a day, and then, the shaykh, he gives his dars, he gives his fawaid. And now you yourself in the future, you may come back to this, look at this and say, well, hold up, which sharh, which explanation, which shaykh explained this? Which one of my teachers? 5-10 years down the line, you may forget these type of things. Even worse, if it's your family members or your children or your descendants, they might not know, okay, where did he get these notes from? He might have gotten them from the internet, from all we know. He might have gotten them from Islam QA or from Google or whatever, right? So I think it's important for the preservation of knowledge, and if you look at the way of the muhaddithun, to clarify these type of things. And this can be done easily. For example, when you write the date, you can write next to the date the name of the shaykh that you are taking these notes from. So you write the date, you write shaykh such and such, and then it will be clear that the notes that will follow that, right, will be the notes of that particular teacher. Now, the way I used to do it in Medina is I used to do it in a color-coded way. My notes were color-coded. Now, for example, we would study one book with 3-4 different teachers in Kulliyah. Now, to differentiate all of the teachers that have explained this book to me, I would use different colors. So for example, such and such shaykh explained the first part of the book, then I would use like the color blue, for example. And I would even write in the beginning of the book, such and such shaykh, color blue, right? Then the second teacher who would teach the book, I would use another color, for example, green. And then the third one, red. And that way, not everything is mixed up, everything is clear. And at this point, if somebody asks me, for example, okay, where did you get this piece of knowledge? I can say from such and such shaykh on such and such day. And how would I know? Because I organized myself in order for that to be clear. So this is my advice to all of you guys. Make sure that you organize yourself in whatever way you wish for you to be clear. Because what happens as well is that later on down the line, you will also come back and add notes to the book that come from you or come from the internet or whatever. So if you don't differentiate, at some point you're going to mix up your own notes from the internet with the notes of the shaykh, so you're not really going to know what's the difference. And personally, I don't think that's a good idea for your family and descendants as well. Everything will be clear to them. They will be able to say, for example, okay, well, my grandfather or my grandmother heard, from such and such teacher that, explanation of such hadith and this fa'idah, and I can even tell you the date, right? At the end of the day, look, when you look at the muhaddithun and the way they preserve the knowledge, it's very inspirational and it should lead us to try and do the same. That knowledge is not something to play with. It's important for things to be clear. It's important to know where we got this knowledge, etc., etc. Something else that is important to mention is the importance of having adab, manners, good manners when it comes to writing on your book. Now, having good manners when it comes to writing on your book, here we are particularly referring to the author of the book. I remember once in Kuliya, the teacher, the sheikh, was explaining a certain book. We were writing notes. And then at some point he said, okay, do you guys see this wording here? This is a mistake. Meaning this is a mistake based on the different manuscripts that there are, and there might be a more authentic version of this wording. Now, the issue of manuscripts, it's an ilm, a science in and of itself, meaning you take different manuscripts, you compare them, and from that, any of the same book, right? And from that, you extract a book and then publish it. Now, there can be mistakes in this. Sometimes the wording is not always accurate. Sometimes it was copied wrong. There's all of these issues to look into. But what's interesting here is that our sheikh told us, this is a mistake, for example, in this particular wording, but do not write, this is a mistake. Yani do not write, هذا خطأ, out of respect for the author. Rather, what you should write is the correct wording, preceded by لعله. So for example, on that mistake, you say لعله كذا. It may be that what is meant is this. Yani this is the correct version. لعله, it may be that this is the correct version of the wording, or the more accurate version of the wording. And this is out of respect for the author. I mean, it's easy for us to come after and, find mistakes here and there, and then be like, oh, well, this is a mistake, kind of like in a criticizing way, when we're not the ones who did the research, we didn't do the hard work, we're not the ones who compared all of the manuscripts, we just come later and be like, okay, this is a mistake, right, it's a mistake. Like, no, this is not good manners. Rather, you should say لعله كذا وكذا, يعني the more accurate wording, maybe this or that, etc. And that's a general advice when it comes to having manners. يعني it may be that a book you find has mistakes. So out of respect for the author, whenever you correct a mistake, you should do so with respect. The last thing that I will mention, and many of the mashayikh mentioned the importance of this, is the fact that one should have a paper that they put inside of the book, maybe at the beginning or maybe at the end, with the main fawaid, meaning the main benefits that are found in this book that you got from reading or from receiving knowledge from a teacher on this book. The reason for this is that this way it is organized for you. It is easy for you to go back to this book and remember kind of what it is about, and remembering the main lessons that can be found in it. And again, this goes for your children, your family, your descendants. They will have everything easy, organized for them. In many cases, you might not even need a paper, because many of the books actually make this available inside of the book itself. They might put, like at the beginning or the end, a blank piece of paper. Some of them very clearly with the heading like a fawaid, where you can write your own fawaid benefits that are found in this book. Another way to do this, and this is the way I like doing it, is to have like post-it notes or post-it stickers that you can, for example, stick on the important pages of the book. That way, once you come back to the book, it's easy for you to find them. Now, obviously, if these benefits are going to be written down, whether it's in the book or on a piece of paper that you put inside of the book, it's important as well to put the page number. That way you can go back to these benefits and find them easily.
شفت كيف؟ وهذه الطريقة أيها الإخوة يعني ما تستطيع أنك تجبر الناس على طريقة واحدة. صحيح. لكن نحن نقول كل واحد لا صحيح. يبد أنك يكون لك طريقة. صحيح. في التقييد وفي حفظ الفوائد وفي ثارستها. خطه بديع الحقيقة.
So I hope you have all benefited from this advice. بإذن ta'ala, we will continue this series and speak about more ways to take notes on a laptop computer or on a notebook. So there's a lot to cover بإذن. And inshallah ta'ala, with that being said, I will see you guys next time. بإذن ta'ala, أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.